The chandelier's glow cast a golden haze across Pemberton Hall as Catherine Fairfax adjusted her faded gloves, trying desperately to conceal the frayed edges. 3 months ago, she would have never imagined herself here. In London, amid the swirling elite of society, watching young debutantes flutter about in silks, worth more than her family's remaining possessions combined. "Remember why we're here," her Aunt Agatha whispered sharply, her bony fingers digging into Catherine's arm. "Your brother's futures depend on it." Catherine nodded, her throat tight. The weight of responsibility had settled upon her shoulders the moment they'd discovered her father's debts after his passing. Their modest country estate, once a haven of warmth and laughter, now stood on the precipice of being claimed by creditors. Her brothers, Henry, just 12, and William, barely 9, would face a life of hardship unless she secured a match this season. "Lady Pemberton is watching," Aunt Agatha continued. "Do try to look amenable. Word has it that her nephew is seeking a bride." Catherine forced her lips into what she hoped resembled a smile. 6 weeks in London had taught her much about the marriage market, how young women were appraised like horses at auction, how fortunes and bloodlines were weighed more carefully than character or compatibility. She had learned to endure the whispers about her outdated gown, to ignore the pitying glances from those who knew of her family's fall from grace. Across the ballroom, a commotion rippled through the crowd. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Fans stilled. Even the musicians faltered. "He's here," someone whispered, and the words passed through the assembly like wildfire. The Duke of Greymont had arrived. Catherine had heard the stories, of course. Every drawing room in London buzzed with tales of Lord Adrian Blackstone, the man whose cold gaze had reportedly sent a rival banker to an early grave, whose business dealings had mysteriously ruined 3 noble families in a single year, whose proposed brides had each fled before the wedding day. Some claimed he practiced dark arts in the shadowed halls of his estate. Others whispered that he had killed a man in a duel and felt nothing afterward. She watched as the crowd parted like the Red Sea, revealing a tall figure dressed in impeccable black. The Duke moved with a predator's grace, each step deliberate, his expression unreadable beneath a shock of raven hair. He acknowledged no one, though every head bowed in his presence. "Don't stare," Aunt Agatha hissed, but Catherine couldn't help herself. There was something magnetic about him, not handsome in the conventional sense, but compelling. His features were too sharp, too severe for traditional beauty, yet they commanded attention. "Who is that beside him?" Catherine asked, noticing a younger gentleman trailing in the Duke's wake. "Lord Richard Hartley, his cousin," came the reply from Lady Eleanor Bentley, a kind widow who had taken Catherine under her wing. "The only person in London who doesn't tremble in Greymont's presence, though why he remains loyal to such a man is beyond comprehension." As the evening progressed, Catherine found herself increasingly distracted by the Duke's presence. He danced with no one, spoke little, yet dominated the room from his position near the windows. She noticed how conversations dimmed when he drew near, how young ladies clutched their mothers' arms when his gaze swept the room. It was during the 3rd set that trouble erupted. Catherine had just finished a quadrille with an elderly baron when she heard a young woman's distressed voice rise above the music. "Please, Your Grace, I meant no offence." Catherine turned to see Miss Sophia Bennet, a gentle soul who had shown her kindness during her first awkward weeks in London, shrinking beneath the Duke's cold stare. The girl's face had gone pale, tears threatening to spill. "Yet offence was given," came his reply, each word precise and cutting. "Perhaps your father should have invested in your education rather than those pearls which, I must note, are remarkably inferior imitations." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Sophia's father had recently made his fortune in trade, new money that many of the aristocracy disdained. The girl's social position was as precarious as Catherine's own. "Your Grace," Sophia stammered, "I only asked if you might—" "You asked if I would introduce you to the Russian ambassador," he interrupted, his voice like ice. "A man whose company I do not keep, for reasons I need not explain to a merchant's daughter playing at being a lady." Something snapped inside Catherine. Before she could reconsider, she was moving across the floor, her worn slippers silent against the marble. Aunt Agatha's horrified, "Catherine, no," faded into the background. She stepped between the Duke and the trembling Sophia, lifting her chin to meet his gaze directly, something no one in that room had dared to do. "Your Grace," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, Surely a man of your standing has nothing to gain by reducing a young lady to tears at her first ball. One might almost suspect you find pleasure in such cruelty, which would be a poor reflection on your character, would it not? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the musicians ceased playing. Catherine was suddenly painfully aware of hundreds of eyes upon her, of her aunt's stricken face, of how her daring might have just condemned her family to ruin. The Duke of Graymont regarded her with an expression of such startling intensity that she nearly stepped back. His eyes, which she now saw were a stormy grey, narrowed slightly. "And you are?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. She curtsied, summoning every ounce of dignity she possessed. "Lady Catherine Fairfax, Your Grace." "Fairfax," he repeated, as though tasting the name, "of Havenwood in Hampshire." "The same," she replied, surprised he knew of her family's modest estate. What happened next would be recounted in drawing-rooms across London for decades to come. The Duke of Graymont, the most feared man in England, did something no one had ever witnessed. He smiled. It was brief, barely a quirk of his lips, but unmistakable. Then, in a move that caused several elderly ladies to reach for their smelling salts, he lowered himself to one knee before Catherine. The collective gasp that swept through the ballroom made the chandeliers tremble. Lady Pemberton clutched her husband's arm. Aunt Agatha swayed dangerously on her feet. "Lady Catherine Fairfax," the Duke said, his voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent room, "your courage is refreshing. I find myself in need of a wife who speaks her mind, rather than cowering in my presence." His eyes never left hers as he continued, "Marry me, and I shall settle your family's debts in full. Your brothers shall have the finest education England can provide. Your aunt shall want for nothing in her remaining years." Catherine stared, certain she had misheard. "Your Grace, I'm not finished," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "In return you will come to Hollowcrest Estate as my Duchess. You will preside over my household, attend functions at my side, and present a united front to society." His voice lowered, though still audible to those nearest. "Case-se comigo, Lady Fairfax, e eu lhe darei tudo o que seu coração rebelde deseja. Liberdade, poder e a verdade que todos temem conhecer sobre mim." Catherine's Portuguese was limited to what she had learned from her Brazilian governess years ago, but she understood enough to be shocked by his offer of freedom, power, and truth. "You have 10 seconds to decide," he stated, as calmly as if discussing the weather. "Accept, and your family's future is secured. Refuse." His gaze flicked briefly to Aunt Agatha's ashen face. "Well, I hear debtor's prison is particularly unpleasant for gentlewomen of a certain age." The threat, thinly veiled as it was, made Catherine's blood run cold. Yet beneath her fear, curiosity flickered. What truths did the infamous Duke hide? What game was he playing? She looked to Sophia, still trembling nearby, to her aunt, whose expression pleaded for salvation, to Lady Eleanor, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. 5 seconds, the Duke counted. Catherine took a deep breath. "I accept your proposal, Your Grace," she said clearly, her words echoing in the stunned silence. Adrian Blackstone rose to his full height, towering over her. Without warning, he took her gloved hand and raised it to his lips, the gesture oddly gentle from a man rumoured to have ruined lives with a single word. "Wise decision," he murmured against her fingers, before turning to address the gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present my future Duchess, Lady Catherine Fairfax. Our wedding will take place in 1 week's time at St. George's Church. I expect your attendance." With that pronouncement, he offered Catherine his arm. "Come, my lady. We have much to discuss before our nuptials." As he led her from the ballroom, through the sea of shocked faces and buzzing whispers, Catherine felt as though she had just signed a pact with the devil himself. Yet the devil had the most fascinating eyes she had ever seen, eyes that, for just a moment as he'd knelt before her, had reflected not cruelty, but something far more dangerous: vulnerability. The doors to Pemberton Hall closed behind them, and Catherine stepped into the cool night air toward whatever fate awaited her as the future Duchess of Graymont. The wedding was not what Catherine had expected. There were no tears of joy, no tender glances exchanged, only the solemn words of the priest and the weight of a golden ring on her finger. St. George's Church had been filled to capacity, not with well-wishers, but with spectators hungry for scandal. They had come to witness the union of the feared duke and the impoverished noblewoman who had dared to challenge him. Now, as the carriage rolled through the iron gates of Hollowcrest Estate, Catherine watched the imposing structure come into view. Grey stone walls rose against a slate sky, Gothic spires piercing the low-hanging clouds. The grounds, though meticulously maintained, lacked the colourful gardens she had grown to love at Havenwood. Here, everything was precise, ordered, and strangely colourless. "Welcome to your new home, Duchess," Adrian said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since they'd left the church. "It's very grand," Catherine replied diplomatically. A hint of amusement touched his lips. "So you mean imposing? Forbidding, perhaps? No need for pretense between us?" "Very well. It looks rather like a fortress designed to keep people away." "An accurate assessment." He nodded toward the approaching structure. Hollowcrest was built during turbulent times. Security was valued above aesthetics. As they drew closer, Catherine noticed details she had missed at first glance. The intricate stonework around the windows, the carefully pruned topiaries, the way the building seemed to embrace the landscape rather than dominate it. There was beauty here, but it was subtle, requiring a discerning eye. The carriage halted before massive oak doors, and servants materialized to assist them. Catherine was struck by the efficiency with which the household staff moved. No wasted motions, no unnecessary words. Like their master, they operated with precision. "Mrs. Fleming," Adrian addressed an older woman with steel-grey hair and impeccable posture. "May I present Her Grace, the Duchess of Greymont?" The housekeeper curtsied deeply. "Welcome, Your Grace. We are honored to serve you." Catherine sensed genuine warmth beneath the formal greeting. "Thank you, Mrs. Fleming. I look forward to becoming acquainted with everyone." "There will be time for that," Adrian interjected. "For now, I imagine the Duchess would appreciate rest after the day's events." "Of course, Your Grace." Mrs. Fleming motioned to a young maid. "Emma will show Her Grace to her chambers." Catherine followed the maid up a grand staircase, leaving Adrian in the entrance hall. As they ascended, she noticed the portraits lining the walls. Generations of Blackstones, their severe expressions watching her progress. "The East Wing has been prepared for you, Your Grace," Emma explained, leading her down a long corridor. "His Grace thought you might appreciate the morning light and the view of the gardens." The consideration surprised Catherine. "Has His Grace been involved in the preparations himself?" "Oh, yes, Your Grace. The Duke has been most particular about your accommodations. Had the blue room completely refurbished, he did, when he learned it was your favorite color." Catherine paused. How could he possibly know that? Emma looked momentarily flustered. "I couldn't say, Your Grace, perhaps a lucky guess." But Catherine doubted it was luck. Adrian Blackstone clearly made it his business to know everything about those who entered his orbit. The thought was both unsettling and intriguing. Her chambers proved to be a revelation. Where she had expected darkness and austerity to match the exterior, she found airy spaces awash in soft blues and creams. A sitting room led to a bedchamber with tall windows overlooking a private garden. A dressing room and bathing chamber completed the suite, all furnished with elegant restraint rather than ostentatious display. "Will this be suitable, Your Grace?" Emma asked anxiously. Catherine turned slowly, taking in the thoughtful touches, fresh flowers in her favorite shade of blue, a writing desk positioned to capture the best light, bookshelves filled with volumes she recognized from conversations at the Pemberton ball. "It's perfect," she said honestly. "Thank you, Emma." After the maid departed, Catherine sank onto a window seat, finally alone with her thoughts. She was now the Duchess of Greymont, mistress of this imposing estate, wife to a man whose name made grown men pale. A week ago, she had been preparing to sell her mother's pearls to pay for Henry's school fees. Now her brothers were enrolled in Eton, her aunt installed in a comfortable townhouse in Bath, and Havenwood's debts settled in full. All it had cost was her freedom. A knock at the door interrupted her reflections. Catherine composed herself, expecting Emma returning with tea. Instead, Adrian stood in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. He had removed his formal attire and wore a simpler jacket of deep burgundy. The change made him appear more approachable, though no less commanding. "I trust your accommodations are satisfactory," he inquired, remaining at the threshold. "They're lovely. You've been most considerate." He inclined his head slightly. "I promised you comfort, Catherine. I am a man of my word." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. "May I come in?" he asked, surprising her with the courtesy. "There are matters we should discuss privately." Catherine gestured to the chairs arranged near the fireplace. "Please." He entered but remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the room. "The blue suits you. I thought it might." "How did you know?" she asked directly. "About my preference for blue." A brief smile touched his lips. "I make it my business to know everything about those who interest me. And I interest you, obviously." His gaze was steady. "Few people have the courage to challenge me publicly. None have done so to defend a stranger." Catherine lifted her chin. "Miss Bennet didn't deserve your cruelty." "Perhaps not," he conceded, moving to examine the bookshelves. "Though you might be surprised to learn that my cruelty may have saved her from worse humiliation." "I don't understand." Adrian turned to face her. "The Russian ambassador she was so eager to meet has a reputation for preying on innocent young women, particularly those with ambitious fathers and new money." Catherine frowned. "You could have warned her privately." "And deprived myself of meeting you." He shook his head. "Some risks are worth taking." The implication that he had deliberately provoked the situation to draw her out was startling. Before she could respond, he continued, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. "Now, as to our arrangement. You have questions, I imagine." "Several hundred," Catherine admitted, "beginning with why you chose me. Surely there are more advantageous matches for a man in your position." Adrian's expression grew thoughtful. "I require a wife who will not faint at shadows or believe every rumor whispered in London drawing rooms. I need someone with both courage and discretion." He paused. "Your reputation for both preceded you." "My reputation?" Catherine couldn't hide her surprise. "I've barely been in London 6 weeks. Long enough to befriend a merchant's daughter when others shunned her. Long enough to visit the poorest areas of the city with Lady Eleanor to distribute food and medicine." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Long enough to slap Viscount Harlow when he made unwanted advances during Lady Whitmore's garden party." Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You've had me watched." "Investigated," he corrected. "A prudent measure before proposing marriage." She stood, suddenly needing to move. "And what of these truths you promised? The ones everyone fears to know about you?" Something flickered in his eyes, caution perhaps, or calculation. "All in good time, Duchess. For now you should know that not all is as it seems at Hollowcrest. There are rooms you must not enter without my express permission. There are questions my staff cannot answer. There will be nights when I'm absent without explanation." "You sound like something from a Gothic novel," Catherine observed. Unexpectedly, Adrian laughed, a rich, genuine sound that transformed his severe features. "I assure you there are no madwomen locked in the attic, no ghostly apparitions haunting the corridors. My secrets are far more mundane, if potentially dangerous." "Dangerous to whom?" "To those who would harm certain vulnerable people under my protection." Before she could press for clarification, a clock chimed in the distance. "We will dine at 7, Adrian said, moving toward the door. "Until then, rest. Explore the house if you wish, but remember my warning about restricted areas. They are marked with black ribbons on the doorknobs." At the threshold he paused. "One more thing, Catherine." "Yes?" "Despite what you've heard, I did not drive those 3 brides away. They were never real engagements, merely convenient fictions to protect certain operations." "Operations?" But Adrian merely bowed and departed, leaving Catherine with far more questions than answers. The next several days established a strange rhythm to Catherine's new life. During daylight hours, Adrian was the model of a considerate husband, if somewhat distant. They broke their fast together each morning, discussed estate matters, and sometimes rode across the vast grounds. He proved to be knowledgeable about a surprising range of topics, from literature to astronomy, and their conversations were often the highlight of Catherine's day. Yet there were peculiarities she couldn't ignore. Certain servants appeared and disappeared at odd hours. Rooms remained locked and unmentioned. Visitors arrived under cover of darkness, speaking in hushed tones with Adrian in his study. Most puzzling was Lord Richard Hartley, Adrian's cousin, who took up residence in the West Wing shortly after their arrival. Unlike the sombre Duke, Richard was all charm and easy smiles, though Catherine sensed a sharp intelligence beneath his frivolous exterior. "Don't let my cousin frighten you," Richard told her one afternoon as they walked in the garden. "His bark is considerably worse than his bite." "I'm not frightened of him," Catherine replied truthfully. "I'm curious." Richard's eyebrows rose. "Curious? Most people settle for terrified. Then most people haven't been paying attention." She stooped to examine a late-blooming rose. "He cultivates that fearsome reputation quite deliberately, doesn't he?" "Very astute, Duchess." Richard seemed impressed. "Adrian finds that fear keeps people from looking too closely at his activities." "And what activities would those be?" Richard's smile turned enigmatic. "That, I'm afraid, is for him to reveal." The mystery deepened one night in her third week at Hollowcrest. Unable to sleep, Catherine had wandered to the library, hoping to find a book to occupy her restless mind. As she approached, voices drifted through the partially open door. "Reckless to bring her here," a woman was saying, her voice tinged with an accent Catherine couldn't place. "The entire operation could be compromised." "I trust my wife," came Adrian's firm reply, "and we needed a believable reason for movement at the estate." "A marriage of convenience, then?" the woman asked. There was a pause before Adrian answered. "It began as such." "And now?" The question hung in the air. Catherine leaned closer, heart hammering in her chest. "Now it's complicated," Adrian finally said, his voice softer than Catherine had ever heard it. Unable to resist, she pushed the door wider, and found herself facing not only Adrian and a striking dark-haired woman, but also 3 children of varying ages, all staring at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Catherine," Adrian said, recovering first, "allow me to introduce Mrs. Sofia Kovacs, our guest." The woman nodded stiffly, her body positioned protectively before the children, 2 boys who appeared to be twins of about 10 and a girl no older than 6. "I apologize for interrupting," Catherine said, taking in the strange tableau. The children were clearly exhausted, their clothes travel-worn but of good quality. "You might as well know," Adrian sighed, gesturing for her to enter and closing the door firmly behind her. "Mrs. Kovacs and her children are Hungarian. Her husband, a prominent journalist, was arrested last month for writing articles critical of the Austrian Empire's policies. They've threatened to send Papa to a prison in Siberia," one of the twins blurted out, before his mother shushed him gently. Catherine's mind raced, pieces falling into place. "You're helping them escape." It wasn't a question, but Adrian nodded nonetheless. "We're arranging passage to America, where Mrs. Kovacs has family. They'll stay here until the arrangements are complete." "We're very grateful for His Grace's assistance," Mrs. Kovacs said, though her eyes remained wary. Catherine looked at the exhausted family, then at her husband. "The locked rooms, the mysterious visitors. This is what you've been hiding." "Part of it," Adrian admitted. "For the past 5 years, I've been involved in a network that helps political dissidents and persecuted minorities escape Europe. But the rumors, the ruined families, the banker who died, carefully cultivated misdirection," he explained. "The ruined families were relocated with new identities after speaking out against oppressive regimes. The banker was indeed ruined after I discovered he was financing slave ships." Catherine stared at him in astonishment. "You've been using your reputation to protect these people. Fear is a powerful deterrent to curious eyes." Adrian's expression softened as he looked at the children. "No one questions why the Duke of Greymont might want privacy, or why strange noises might come from his estate at night." The young girl yawned widely, drawing Catherine's attention. "These children need rest," she said decisively. "Mrs. Kovacs, please bring them to the East Wing. The Blue Room connects to a smaller chamber that would be perfect for the children, and no one will think it odd for me to request extra meals or linens." Adrian studied her with an unreadable expression. "You're not upset?" "Upset? That my husband is risking his reputation and possibly his life to save innocent people?" Catherine shook her head. "I'm beginning to think the most dangerous thing about you, Your Grace, is how thoroughly you've deceived everyone, including me, about who you truly are." For the first time since she'd met him, Adrian Blackstone looked genuinely surprised. And in that moment, Catherine realized that the strange fluttering in her chest whenever he was near had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the fact that she was falling in love with the most misunderstood man in England. The arrival of Mrs. Kovacs and her children transformed Hollowcrest from a house of mysteries into something Catherine had never expected, a home. With Adrian's approval, she moved the Hungarian family to a suite of rooms adjacent to her own, allowing her to help care for the children while their mother recovered from the arduous journey. "You've a natural way with them," Adrian observed one afternoon, finding Catherine teaching the young girl, Ilona, to play the pianoforte in the music room. Catherine smiled as the child picked out a simple melody. "They remind me of my brothers. I miss them terribly." "Perhaps we should invite them to visit," Adrian suggested, leaning against the doorframe. "Once our current guests have departed." The offer surprised her. "You wouldn't mind?" "This is your home now, Catherine. Your family is welcome here." Such moments, glimpses of thoughtfulness beneath his guarded exterior, had become increasingly frequent. Catherine found herself watching for them, treasuring each one as evidence of the man behind the mask. With each passing day, more of Hollowcrest's secrets revealed themselves. The locked room in the north wing housed a printing press, used to create documents and papers for those Adrian helped escape. The frequent midnight visitors were contacts from his network of allies, diplomats, sea captains, merchants, and others, who shared his dangerous work. Most surprising was the discovery that Richard's frivolous persona was as much a disguise as Adrian's fearsome reputation. The charming lord served as their primary intelligence gatherer, his social connections, providing vital information about political shifts that might endanger their protégés. "You risked everything to tell me the truth," Catherine remarked one evening as they sat in his study, reviewing coded messages from contacts in Vienna. Adrian's hand stilled above the papers. "I risked everything the moment I decided to marry you," he corrected. "Truth was merely a necessary consequence. You could have maintained the deception, kept me ignorant of your activities." "To what end?" He looked up, his grey eyes intent. "I needed a partner, Catherine, not a decorative accessory unaware of the danger surrounding her." "A partner," she repeated, the word warming her despite the autumn chill seeping through the windows. "Is that how you see me now?" Something shifted in his expression, a softening she had come to recognize as genuine emotion breaking through his careful control. "I see you as far more than I anticipated when I knelt in Pemberton Hall," he admitted quietly. Before Catherine could respond to this near confession, a commotion erupted in the entrance hall. Raised voices and hurried footsteps shattered the intimate moment. Adrian was on his feet instantly, striding to the door with Catherine close behind. They found Richard in the hall, supporting a man whose coat was stained with what could only be blood. "James," Adrian said sharply, recognizing the injured man as one of their most trusted contacts. "What happened?" "Ambush," James gasped, clutching his side. "Someone knew about the transfer point. Redcoats waiting. Arrested the Bennets." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. The Bennett family, a father, mother, and 2 daughters, had been scheduled to depart for America that very night. Their crime had been advocating for factory workers' rights, earning them powerful enemies among mill owners. "How did they know?" Richard demanded, helping James to a chair as Mrs. Fleming rushed in with bandages. "Must be informant," James managed, before his eyes rolled back and he lost consciousness. Adrian's face had gone deadly pale. "Get Dr. Elliot," he ordered a footman. Discreetly. "Richard, secure all documents." "Catherine, I'll help Mrs. Fleming with James," she said firmly, already examining the wound. "It's not as deep as it appears. Fetch my sewing kit." As the household mobilized around the crisis, Catherine caught fragments of urgent conversation between Adrian and Richard. "Have to assume we're compromised. Move the Kovacs family tonight. Could be anyone with access." The implications chilled her. Someone had betrayed them. Someone who knew their roots, their methods. And now innocent people, including children, were in custody because of it. Hours later, with James stabilized under Dr. Elliot's care and the Kovacs family hastily relocated to another safe house, Catherine finally confronted Adrian in their private sitting room. "You suspect someone in the household?" she stated without preamble. Adrian was standing at the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. "I suspect everyone," he corrected, "until proven otherwise." "Even me?" The question escaped before she could reconsider. He turned, surprise flashing across his features. "No, not you." "Why not?" I'm the newest addition to your household, the most logical suspect. Because I know you, Catherine. His voice was firm, unwavering. Your heart, your principles. You would never endanger innocent lives, regardless of your feelings toward me. The complete faith in his assessment humbled her. Then who? Adrian ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of frustration. We've been operating for 5 years without incident. Our procedures are rigorous. Access to complete information is limited to just 3 people, myself, Richard, And who? Catherine pressed when he stopped abruptly. Adrian's expression darkened. And Lady Eleanor Bentley. Catherine stared in disbelief. Lady Eleanor, the woman who has been like a mother to me since I arrived in London. Impossible. She helps coordinate our London operations, Adrian explained. She knows all our transfer points, all our contacts, and she was one of the few people aware of tonight's arrangement. There must be another explanation, Catherine insisted. Lady Eleanor dedicates her life to helping others. Why would she betray that cause? People have many motivations, Adrian said grimly. Blackmail, threats, financial pressure. We cannot rule out possibilities based on sentiment. The accusation stung, especially coming from a man who had just proclaimed his faith in her character. If you truly believe Lady Eleanor capable of such treachery, then your judgment of people is deeply flawed, including your assessment of me. Adrian's jaw tightened. This is not about emotion, Catherine. It is about facts. We must identify the traitor before more lives are lost. Then we shall do so using evidence, not suspicion, she countered. I want to speak with James when he wakes. Perhaps he saw something that could narrow our focus. Absolutely not. Adrian's tone turned commanding. I want you removed from this investigation entirely. In fact, I'm sending you to Bath tomorrow to stay with your aunt until this matter is resolved. Catherine felt as though he had struck her. You're sending me away after everything we've shared? I'm protecting you, he insisted. If there is a traitor among us, everyone associated with this operation is at risk. I am your wife, Catherine reminded him, her voice rising. Your partner, as you said not an hour ago. I will not be dispatched like an inconvenient child when trouble arises. Adrian's expression hardened. This is not open for discussion. The carriage will be ready at dawn. For a moment, Catherine was too stunned to respond. Then, drawing herself up to her full height, she said coldly, I see now that your fine words about partnership were merely that. Words. When faced with adversity, you revert to the autocrat everyone believes you to be. She moved toward the door. Perhaps they were right about you after all. Catherine, he began, but she had already gone, the door closing firmly behind her. In her chambers, Catherine paced like a caged lioness, anger and hurt warring within her. How quickly things had changed, from intimate confession to cold dismissal in the span of an evening. She had begun to believe that Adrian trusted her, valued her, perhaps even cared for her. Now she wasn't certain she knew him at all. A soft knock interrupted her tumultuous thoughts. Enter, she called, expecting Emma with tea. Instead, Mrs. Kovacs stood in the doorway, her face drawn with worry. Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace, but I could not leave without speaking to you. Leave? Catherine's confusion momentarily overshadowed her personal turmoil. I thought you were moved to another safe house. We were, the woman confirmed. But His Grace has arranged for us to depart immediately for Liverpool, where a ship awaits. We sail on the morning tide. So soon? Catherine gestured for her to sit. Is it safe? His Grace believes the risk of remaining is greater than the risk of travel. Mrs. Kovacs clasped her hands tightly in her lap. I came to thank you for your kindness these past weeks. The children, her voice faltered. They have known so little gentleness since their father's arrest. Your care has meant more than I can express. Touched by the woman's words, Catherine reached out to cover her trembling hands. You owe me no thanks. I only wish I could do more. Mrs. Kovacs looked up, her dark eyes intent. Then perhaps you will listen to what I must tell you about your husband. Catherine stiffened. What about him? When my husband was arrested, I believed all hope was lost. The authorities seized our home, our possessions, everything. We were destitute, facing separation and worse. Mrs. Kovacs drew a shaky breath. Then a stranger approached me in the market. He gave me a letter and instructions to burn it after reading. From Adrian. The woman nodded. The letter contained money and detailed directions for our escape, but more importantly, it contained information about my husband's location and condition. Information that could only have come from someone with access to the highest levels of government. Catherine frowned. I don't understand. Your husband did not merely arrange our escape, Your Grace. He risked his life to obtain that information. Mrs. Kovacs leaned forward earnestly. The man you married moves in circles of power you cannot imagine. His reputation for ruthlessness is a careful construction that allows him access to men who would otherwise never reveal their secrets. A chill ran down Catherine's spine as pieces began to fall into place. The society events he never misses, the political figures who fear yet still receive him. Precisely, Mrs. Kovacs nodded. The Duke cultivates relationships with the very people who create the policies he works to undermine. They speak freely in his presence, believing him sympathetic to their causes. Catherine's mind raced. The banker who died was financing slave ships, yes, but also providing information to your husband about government officials involved in the trade. Mrs. Kovacs' expression grew somber. When that banker was found dead, many assumed the Duke responsible. Few know he died of apoplexy after confessing his crimes to His Grace, and the ruined families, relocated for their safety after speaking against injustices. Mrs. Kovacs squeezed Catherine's hands. Your husband walks a dangerous path, Your Grace. He plays the villain so convincingly that even his allies sometimes believe the mask. Catherine thought of their argument, her accusation that he reverted to the autocrat everyone believed him to be. Had she, too, been deceived by the performance? Why are you telling me this? She asked quietly. Because I see how he looks at you when he thinks no one notices. The woman smiled softly. And because I believe you are the one person who might save him from himself. What do you mean? The Duke has lived so long behind his mask that I fear he has forgotten who he truly is. Mrs. Kovacs stood, moving toward the door. He will send you away because he believes it protects you. But perhaps what he needs most is someone brave enough to stay. After the Hungarian woman departed, Catherine sat motionless, absorbing this new perspective on her enigmatic husband. If what Mrs. Kovacs said was true, Adrian's determination to send her to Bath came not from distrust, but from a desperate desire to keep her safe, even at the cost of alienating her. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. "Enter," she called, composing herself. Richard appeared, his usual cheerful demeanor subdued. "My apologies for the late hour, Duchess. I thought you should know that James is awake and asking to speak with you." Catherine rose immediately. Adrian forbade it. "My cousin is currently occupied with arranging the Kovacs family's departure." Richard offered a conspiratorial smile. "What he doesn't know won't harm him." Minutes later, Catherine stood beside James's sickbed in a small chamber off the kitchen. The man looked pale but alert, his side heavily bandaged. "Your Grace," he greeted weakly. "I insisted on seeing you." "Save your strength," Catherine advised, taking the chair beside him. "Tell me what you remember about the ambush." James's eyes darkened. "It was a perfect trap. They knew exactly when and where to find us." He shifted, wincing with pain. But there was something strange about the officer in charge. He seemed reluctant. Reluctant? He ordered his men to treat the Bennets gently, made a show of arresting them, but I heard him whisper that they would be released within a fortnight with documentation for safe passage to Scotland. James's brow furrowed. "He knew my name, Your Grace. Called me by it before I'd identified myself." Catherine leaned forward. "Could you recognize this officer again?" "Without question." James nodded. "Tall fellow. Distinguished. Has a scar above his right eye." The description struck a chord of recognition. "Did he wear a signet ring? With a falcon design?" James's eyes widened. "Yes." "How did you know?" Catherine sat back, stunned by the implications. "Because I've seen that ring before." On the hand of Sir Edmund Blackwood, Lady Eleanor's brother. Richard, who had been listening silently, sucked in a sharp breath. "Sir Edmund is Deputy Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police." "And Lady Eleanor's only living family," Catherine added, "a family known for its loyalty to the Crown." "If Sir Edmund is involved," Richard said slowly, "then Lady Eleanor may not be our traitor after all," Catherine finished. "She may be completely unaware of her brother's actions, or—" Or they could be working together in some capacity we don't understand, Richard concluded grimly. Catherine stood, decision made. I need to speak with Lady Eleanor. Tonight. Adrian will never allow it. Then we won't tell him. Catherine met Richard's startled gaze. Can you arrange for a carriage without his knowledge? After a moment's hesitation, Richard nodded. For the Duchess of Greymont? Of course. But Catherine, this is extremely dangerous. More dangerous than allowing innocent people to be captured while we debate who to trust? She shook her head firmly. I won't sit idle while others suffer. An hour later, disguised in a plain cloak borrowed from Emma, Catherine was driven through London's foggy streets toward Lady Eleanor's townhouse. Richard had insisted on accompanying her, armed with both a pistol and the considerable charm he might need to explain their unexpected midnight visit. Remember, he cautioned as the carriage slowed, reveal nothing about our suspicions. Observe her reactions carefully. Catherine nodded, heart pounding as they approached the elegant residence. What if she was wrong? What if Lady Eleanor truly was the traitor? Or worse, what if confronting her put the woman in danger from other unknown enemies? They were admitted by a startled butler and shown to the drawing room, where Lady Eleanor appeared moments later in a hastily donned dressing gown, her silver hair loose about her shoulders. Catherine? Lord Hartley? What on earth? Her concerned expression shifted to alarm as she took in their serious faces. What's happened? Is someone hurt? Catherine studied the woman who had shown her such kindness, searching for any sign of deception. We need to speak with you about your brother, Lady Eleanor. The colour drained from Eleanor's face. Edmund, has he been injured? No, Richard answered smoothly, but we have reason to believe he may be involved in a rather delicate matter concerning certain activities at Hollowcrest. Understanding dawned in Eleanor's eyes. She dismissed the hovering butler with a quiet word, then sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of her 60 years. You know, she whispered, about Edmund's position, about our arrangement. Catherine and Richard exchanged glances. Perhaps you could explain that arrangement, Catherine suggested carefully. Lady Eleanor clasped her trembling hands. It began 3 years ago, when Edmund was promoted to Deputy Commissioner. He discovered evidence of His Grace's humanitarian endeavours. She looked up, eyes clear and direct. My brother is a good man, Catherine. He believes in justice, but he also knows the law can be wielded cruelly by those in power. So instead of exposing Adrian's network, Richard prompted, Edmund approached me as an intermediary. He offered a compromise. Eleanor's voice strengthened. He would provide warnings about planned raids, ensure that any captured families were treated humanely, and ultimately released with new identities. In exchange, His Grace would share information about truly dangerous criminals using similar escape routes, murderers, traitors, those who would do real harm. Catherine released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A secret alliance, not betrayal. Precisely. Lady Eleanor looked troubled. But I don't understand. Why are you asking about this now? His Grace is fully aware of our arrangement. Richard stiffened. Adrian knows about Sir Edmund? Of course. Eleanor frowned. He, Edmund, and I meet quarterly to exchange information. The Duke insisted on absolute transparency between us. Catherine felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. If Adrian knows about Sir Edmund, then why would he suspect you of betraying the network? Why would he believe tonight's ambush was the result of treachery? Eleanor's expression changed to one of alarm. There was an ambush. Tonight. The genuine shock in her voice confirmed Catherine's growing suspicion. The Bennet family was arrested at the transfer point. James was injured escaping. But that's impossible, Eleanor protested. Edmund assured me the authorities would be focusing on the docks tonight, nowhere near the transfer point. Unless, Richard said slowly, someone changed the orders after Sir Edmund issued them, or someone provided false information about the transfer location, Catherine added, a terrible thought taking shape. Lady Eleanor, when did you last speak with Adrian about tonight's plans? 3 days ago, Eleanor replied promptly. He sent a messenger with the final arrangements, the Bennets to depart via the Finchley Road route at midnight. Catherine and Richard exchanged alarmed glances. The Finchley Road, Richard repeated. The Bennets were intercepted on Hampstead Heath. They were never meant to take the Finchley Road route. Eleanor paled. But the message, it bore His Grace's seal, which could be forged, Catherine said, rising to her feet. Lady Eleanor, we need to return to Hollowcrest immediately. I believe we've been looking in entirely the wrong direction for our traitor. As their carriage raced back through the night, Catherine's mind worked furiously. If Lady Eleanor had received false information bearing Adrian's seal, someone close to him, someone with access to his study, his papers, perhaps even his private correspondence, was responsible. It has to be someone in the household, she told Richard. Someone Adrian trusts implicitly. Richard's expression had turned grim. There are only 3 people with access to his private seal. Myself, Mrs. Fleming, And who? Catherine pressed. Richard hesitated before answering. His secretary, Mr. Phillips. The name struck Catherine like a physical blow. Mr. Phillips, the quiet, efficient man who had been with Adrian for over a decade, who managed his correspondence, handled his appointments, and moved through Hollowcrest like a shadow, seeing everything while remaining nearly invisible himself. We need to find Adrian, she said urgently as the carriage turned through the gates of Hollowcrest. Before... Her words died as they rounded the final bend in the drive. Hollowcrest's entrance hall blazed with light, and standing on the steps, his expression thunderous, was Adrian. I believe, Richard murmured as the carriage halted, that finding my cousin will not be our primary challenge. Indeed, Adrian was striding toward them before they could descend, his face a mask of controlled fury that did little to hide the fear beneath. Where have you been? He demanded, his voice dangerously soft as he helped Catherine down. Do you have any idea? He stopped, noticing her plain cloak and Catherine's determined expression. Understanding dawned. You went to Lady Eleanor. Yes, Catherine confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. And I discovered that you've been lying to me, Adrian. Catherine, he began, but she cut him off. You knew about Sir Edmund. You knew he and Lady Eleanor were allies, not enemies. She stepped closer, searching his face. Why would you let me believe she might be a traitor? Why send me away unless... Adrian's expression shifted, realization replacing anger. Unless I believed the true threat was much closer to home, he finished quietly. Inside Hollowcrest itself. Mr. Phillips, Richard supplied, joining them. I've already explained our suspicions to Catherine. Adrian's jaw tightened. Phillips left abruptly an hour ago, claiming a family emergency. When I went to secure certain documents afterward, I found my private correspondence had been disturbed. The Kovacs family, Catherine gasped. Are they safe? They departed before Phillips left, Adrian assured her, but I've dispatched riders to intercept them and alter their route just in case. As they moved inside, Adrian kept Catherine close, his hand at the small of her back. The touch was protective, possessive, and for the first time she welcomed it without reservation. In his study, Adrian poured brandy for Richard and himself, offering Catherine a glass of sherry, which she accepted gratefully. I should have told you about Eleanor and Edmund, he acknowledged, his voice low. But the fewer people who knew, the safer they remained. You still should have trusted me, Catherine countered, though her tone held more hurt than anger now. It wasn't about trust. Adrian's eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. It was about protecting you from the burden of secrets that could put you in danger. The same reason you tried to send me to Bath, she realized, not because you doubted my loyalty, but because you feared for my safety. Always. The single word contained such emotion that Catherine felt her remaining anger dissolve. I won't be protected at the expense of truth, she told him firmly. Not any more. If I am truly your partner, Adrian, then I must know everything, the dangers as well as the triumphs. He studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. Very well. No more secrets. His lips quirked in a brief smile. Though I warn you, the truth is rarely as romantic as the mystery. Richard cleared his throat. As touching as this reconciliation is, we still have a traitor to catch and a network to secure. Already in progress, Adrian assured him. I've sent word to all our contacts with Phillips's description. Edmund has officers searching known departure points. He turned back to Catherine. But for now you should rest. It's been a trying night. I'm not tired, she protested, even as fatigue threatened to overwhelm her. Adrian's expression softened. Then at least allow me to escort you to your chambers. We can continue this discussion in the morning. As they climbed the grand staircase, Catherine felt the weight of the evening's revelations pressing upon her. By the time they reached her door, exhaustion had replaced adrenaline, making her sway slightly on her feet. "You were right," she admitted as Adrian steadied her. "Perhaps I do need rest." "Catherine," he said, his voice suddenly urgent, "I need you to know." "Yes?" she prompted when he paused. Adrian's hand rose to touch her cheek, the gesture achingly tender. "When I knelt before you at Pemberton Hall, I offered a business arrangement, a convenient alliance." His eyes, usually so guarded, were open and vulnerable. "I never expected to find myself wishing it were more." Catherine's heart thundered in her chest. "And what do you wish it were, Adrian?" "A true marriage," he answered simply, "in every sense of the word." Before she could respond, he bent and placed a soft, questioning kiss on her lips, their first since the brief formal exchange at the altar. Unlike that ceremonial gesture, this was a real kiss, warm and sweet, and full of promise. When they parted, Catherine kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the sensation. "I think," she said finally, a smile playing at her lips, "that might be arranged." Adrian's answering smile transformed his face, revealing the man she had glimpsed in rare, unguarded moments, the man she had come to love despite every reason not to. "Rest now," he murmured, reluctantly stepping back. "Tomorrow will bring new challenges." "And we'll face them together," Catherine added, no longer a question but a statement of fact. As she closed her door, Catherine felt a sense of peace despite the dangers still surrounding them. The Duke of Shadows had finally stepped into the light, at least for her, and whatever trials lay ahead, they would confront them as true partners, in purpose, in peril, and in love. Dawn broke over Hollowcrest with pale fingers of light reaching through Catherine's window. She had slept despite her certainty that she would not, exhaustion claiming her shortly after Adrian's departure. Now as she dressed with Emma's assistance, her mind turned again to the revelations of the previous night, and to the kiss that had changed everything between them. "His Grace asked me to inform you that he awaits your presence in the breakfast room, Your Grace," Emma said, fastening the last button on Catherine's morning dress of deep blue. "Thank you, Emma." Catherine studied her reflection, noting the heightened color in her cheeks that had nothing to do with cosmetics. "Has there been any word about Mr. Phillips?" Emma's expression darkened. "Nothing specific, Your Grace, but there's been a great commotion since dawn, messengers coming and going, Lord Hartley riding out with several men." She lowered her voice. "They say Mr. Phillips took important papers when he fled, documents that could endanger many lives." Catherine's stomach clenched. "Let us hope they find him quickly, then." In the breakfast room, Adrian stood by the window, his tall frame outlined by morning light. He turned as she entered, and the warmth in his eyes sent a flutter through her chest. "You slept well?" he inquired, moving to pull out her chair. "Surprisingly so," she admitted, taking her seat. "Though my dreams were vivid." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Pleasant, I hope?" "Most were." She accepted a cup of tea from a footman, using the moment to compose herself. "Is there any news of Phillips?" Adrian's expression sobered. "Not yet. Edmund's men tracked him to Dover but lost his trail there. It's likely he's fled to the continent." "With documents that could expose your entire network," Catherine concluded, "what can be done?" "We're already doing it." Adrian joined her at the table, though he left his plate untouched. "Every contact is being warned. Safe houses emptied, routes changed. It's a massive undertaking, but necessary." Catherine studied him, noting the shadows beneath his eyes. "You haven't slept at all, have you?" "There hasn't been time." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of deep concern. "Phillips was with me for 12 years, Catherine. I trusted him completely. Every operation, every contact, every family we helped, he knew it all. Why would he betray you after so long?" she wondered aloud. "What could possibly be worth such a risk?" Adrian's expression darkened. "According to our sources, he was approached 6 months ago by representatives of a foreign power, one particularly interested in identifying political dissidents who had escaped their reach." "Russia?" Catherine guessed, remembering Mrs. Kovach's mention of Siberian prisons. "Austria," Adrian sighed. "The Habsburg Empire has been particularly ruthless in suppressing nationalist movements within its borders. Many of those we've helped were Hungarian, Polish, or Italian revolutionaries seeking to liberate their homelands from Austrian control." Catherine thought of the Kovacs children, so innocent of the political forces that had torn their family apart. And Philip sold them all for what? Money? Money, certainly, but also promises of position and power. Adrian's voice held a rare note of personal hurt. I considered him not merely an employee, but a friend. Perhaps the only one besides Richard I truly trusted. Without thinking, Catherine reached across the table to cover his hand with hers. You have more friends than you realize, Adrian. Lady Eleanor, Sir Edmund, James, Mrs. Fleming, and me. She squeezed his fingers gently. Especially me. His hand turned beneath hers, entwining their fingers. I begin to believe that, Catherine. Despite everything, I begin to believe that. The tender moment was interrupted by the arrival of Richard, still in his riding clothes and looking exhausted. We've found him, he announced without preamble. Adrian was on his feet instantly. Where? Not where you'd expect. Richard accepted a glass of brandy from a footman despite the early hour. He never left London at all. The Dover trail was a false lead. Clever, Adrian murmured. Hide in plain sight while we search the continent. Not clever enough. Richard drained his glass. Sir Edmund's men spotted him entering a boarding house in Cheapside. They're watching the place now, awaiting our instructions. Catherine saw the change come over Adrian, the warmth and vulnerability of moments ago replaced by the cold, dangerous persona of the Duke of Greymont. His face hardened, eyes turning to flint. Ready my carriage, he ordered a hovering servant. Richard, select 4 men you trust implicitly. We leave in 20 minutes. Adrian, Catherine said, rising as well. What do you intend to do? His expression softened fractionally as he looked at her. Recover the documents. Ensure Phillips can never threaten our network again. The implications of his words chilled her. You mean to kill him? It wasn't a question, but Adrian answered regardless, his voice measured. I mean to do whatever is necessary to protect innocent lives. Then I'm coming with you, she declared, straightening her shoulders. Absolutely not, Adrian and Richard responded in unison. Catherine lifted her chin. You promised no more secrets, no more protection at the expense of truth. If I am truly your partner, Adrian, I should be present for this. This isn't about secrets, Adrian countered, his voice taut with tension. This is about safety. Phillips is dangerous, desperate, and likely armed. All the more reason to resolve this without bloodshed, Catherine argued. My presence might help ensure that. Adrian stared at her, conflict evident in his expression. You believe you can persuade me to mercy? I believe I can remind you of who you truly are, she answered quietly. Not the man London fears, but the man I've come to love. The word hung in the air between them, the first time either had spoken it aloud. Adrian's expression transformed, shock giving way to something so vulnerable that Catherine's heart ached. Richard cleared his throat awkwardly. I'll check on the carriage, he muttered, withdrawing tactfully. Alone, Adrian moved to Catherine, taking her hands in his. You have chosen a remarkably inconvenient moment for such a declaration, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I've found that truth rarely arrives at convenient moments. She met his gaze steadily. I love you, Adrian Blackstone, not the Duke of Greymont, not the savior of refugees, not the feared aristocrat, though they are all part of you. I love the man who remembers my favorite color, who protects those who cannot protect themselves, who kissed me last night as though I were something precious. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. Catherine, He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. I have lived behind masks for so long I feared I had forgotten who I truly was. Until you. He drew her closer, one hand rising to cup her cheek. You make me want to be the man you believe me to be, the man worthy of your love. Then be that man today, she urged softly. Show Phillips and yourself that justice need not come at the cost of mercy. Adrian searched her face, conflict still evident in his eyes. Finally, he nodded once. Very well. You may accompany us, but you will remain in the carriage with armed guards until we have secured Phillips and the documents. That is non-negotiable. Catherine recognized the concession for what it was, a step toward the partnership she had demanded. Agreed. An hour later, their carriage rolled to a stop on a narrow street in Cheapside, far from the elegant squares and crescents of Mayfair. Through the window, Catherine could see a nondescript boarding house, its windows grimy, its steps worn by countless feet. Sir Edmund Blackwood himself approached their carriage, his tall figure unmistakable even in plain clothes. The scar above his right eye caught the light as he nodded respectfully to Adrian. "Your Grace." "He's still inside, third floor, front room." Edmund's gaze shifted to Catherine, surprise evident. "Your Grace," he added with a deeper bow. "Sir Edmund," Catherine acknowledged. "A pleasure to finally meet you, though I wish the circumstances were less grave." "As do I, Your Grace." He returned his attention to Adrian. "My men have secured all exits. He's alone as far as we can determine." Adrian nodded, his expression grim. "Catherine will remain here with 2 guards. Richard, Edmund, you'll accompany me. The rest will secure the perimeter." As the men prepared to enter the building, Catherine touched Adrian's arm. "Remember your promise," she said quietly. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the mask slipped, revealing the man beneath. "I remember," he assured her before turning away, his bearing once again that of the formidable Duke of Greymont. The waiting was excruciating. Catherine sat rigid in the carriage, straining to hear any sound from the boarding house. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. She was about to disregard Adrian's instructions and investigate herself when the front door finally opened. Richard emerged first, followed by Adrian and Edmund. Between them they escorted a slight, balding man whose wrists were bound before him, Mr. Phillips, looking nothing like the dangerous traitor Catherine had imagined, but rather a frightened, ordinary man. Adrian approached the carriage, opening the door himself. "It's done," he said simply. "We have the documents." "And Phillips?" she asked, searching his face. "Alive, as you wished." There was no resentment in his tone, only a weariness that suggested the confrontation had been difficult. "He will face justice, but not at my hands." Relief washed over Catherine. "Thank you." Adrian's gaze held hers. "Don't thank me yet. There's more to this than we realized." He glanced over his shoulder at the prisoner. "Phillips didn't act alone." "What do you mean?" "He claims he was coerced, that someone threatened his family if he didn't cooperate." Adrian's expression was troubled. "Someone who knew about our operations in detail." "Do you believe him?" "I'm not certain." Adrian helped her from the carriage. "But we're about to find out. He's agreed to tell us everything, on the condition that you be present." Catherine blinked in surprise. "Me? Why?" "He says you'll understand, that you've seen something the rest of us missed." Adrian's confusion matched her own. "Does that mean anything to you?" Catherine frowned, searching her memory for any interaction with Phillips that might explain his request. She had spoken with the secretary only a handful of times, all brief exchanges about household matters. "I can't imagine what he means," she admitted, "but I'm willing to hear him out." They entered the boarding house, climbing narrow stairs to a sparse room containing only a bed, a table, and 2 chairs. Phillips sat on one, Richard standing guard behind him. Sir Edmund took up position by the door as Adrian guided Catherine to the remaining chair facing the secretary. Up close, Phillips looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed, his hands shaking. "Thank you for coming, Your Grace," he said to Catherine, his voice hoarse. "Mr. Phillips," she acknowledged coolly. "I understand you have information to share." He nodded, casting a nervous glance at Adrian. "I need you to understand I never wanted to betray His Grace. I had no choice." "There is always a choice," Adrian said sharply. "Explain yourself." Phillips swallowed hard. "It began 6 months ago. My sister in Bristol fell ill. Consumption. She has 3 young children, no husband. I've been supporting them for years." He looked down at his bound hands. "One evening a man approached me outside Hollowcrest. He knew everything about my sister, about His Grace's network, about my position of trust. He showed me a locket containing a lock of my niece's hair taken while she slept. The threat was clear," Catherine murmured, beginning to understand. "He said if I didn't provide information about the network, my sister and her children would suffer terribly." Phillips looked up, his eyes pleading. "I tried to warn those I could without betraying His Grace outright, gave false information when possible. But last night," he shuddered, "last night he demanded the location of the Bennett family and threatened to kill my niece if I refused." "Who?" Adrian demanded, his voice like steel. "Who threatened you?" Phillips hesitated, fear evident in his face. "He never gave his name," Always met me in darkness, always wore a hood. But there was something—" He turned to Catherine. "That's why I asked for you, Your Grace. You noticed it. At the dinner 3 weeks ago." Catherine frowned, recalling a formal dinner at Hollowcrest attended by several political figures. "I'm not sure what you mean." "The Austrian ambassador was present," Phillips prompted. "You commented on his unusual ring to Lady Eleanor. Said it reminded you of something." Memory sparked. "The ring with the double-headed eagle," Catherine recalled. "I remarked that it resembled the Habsburg imperial seal, but with subtle differences." "Yes," Phillips nodded eagerly. "The man who threatened me wore an identical ring. I glimpsed it once when he handed me instructions." Adrian and Richard exchanged sharp glances. "Count Esterhazy was at that dinner," Richard said slowly, "as was Lord Wetherby from the Foreign Office." "And Baron Keller," Adrian added, his expression darkening, "who has extensive business interests in Vienna." Catherine's mind raced. "The ring I noticed was on Ambassador Richter's hand. Could he be involved?" "Richter is too obvious a choice," Adrian mused. "A direct link to Austria would be too easily traced. But someone working for Austrian interests, yet positioned to move freely in English society," Richard suggested. Sir Edmund, who had been listening silently, stepped forward. "Baron Keller," he said decisively. "My office has received reports of his frequent meetings with Austrian diplomats, always in private. Nothing conclusive, but suspicious." Adrian turned back to Phillips. "The documents you took, where are they now?" "Hidden beneath the floorboard," Phillips replied, indicating with his head. "All of them. I couldn't bring myself to deliver them, knowing how many would suffer." Richard quickly located the loose board and retrieved a leather portfolio bulging with papers. Adrian examined them briefly before nodding in satisfaction. "Everything appears to be here," he confirmed, relief evident in his voice. He fixed Phillips with a hard stare. "Why run if you hadn't betrayed us completely?" "Fear," Phillips admitted. "I knew once the Bennets were arrested you'd discover the betrayal. I panicked." His shoulders slumped. "I should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning. I've served you loyally for 12 years, watched you risk everything for strangers. I should have known you would protect my family too." Catherine saw the conflict in Adrian's face, anger at the betrayal warring with understanding of Phillips's impossible situation. "Your sister and her children," Adrian said finally. "Where are they now?" "Still in Bristol," Phillips replied. "Number 17 Orchard Street." Adrian nodded to Edmund. "Send men immediately. Bring them to Hollowcrest under guard until we've sorted this matter." Hope flickered in Phillips's eyes. "You'll protect them." "I protect all innocent lives threatened by tyranny," Adrian replied, his voice steady, "even those connected to men who have betrayed me." The secretary bowed his head, tears falling freely now. "Thank you, Your Grace. I don't deserve your mercy." "No, you don't," Adrian agreed, though without malice. "But perhaps you can earn redemption by helping us identify and stop the true enemy." As they prepared to transport Phillips back to Hollowcrest, Catherine approached Adrian, who stood slightly apart, examining the recovered documents. "You spared him," she said softly. Adrian glanced up, his expression weary but resolute. "I gave him justice tempered with mercy, as you asked." Catherine touched his arm gently. "It was the right choice. Perhaps." He tucked the documents securely inside his coat. "Or perhaps I've simply grown soft under your influence." "I prefer to think you've grown more fully into yourself," she countered. "The man who has always been there beneath the masks and shadows." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "A romantic notion." "I am becoming increasingly romantic these days," she admitted. "A hazardous condition, I'm told." Adrian's expression softened as he looked at her, truly looked at her, with all pretense and guardedness stripped away. "Earlier you said, that is, you spoke of love." Catherine felt warmth rise to her cheeks, but held his gaze steadily. "I did, and I meant it." His hand rose to touch her face, fingers gentle against her skin. "No one has loved me since my mother died when I was a boy," he said quietly. "I convinced myself I neither needed nor wanted such complications. And now?" she prompted when he fell silent. "Now I find myself hopelessly entangled in the most complicated emotion of all." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "I love you, Catherine. God help me, but I do." Joy bloomed in her chest, sweet and fierce and overwhelming. "Then God help us both," she replied, rising on her toes to press a swift kiss to his lips, heedless of their audience. "For I have no intention of simplifying matters any time soon." The journey back to Hollowcrest was marked by a curious mixture of tension and elation. Adrian sat beside Catherine in the carriage, Phillips and Richard across from them, yet despite the gravity of their situation, she could feel the change between herself and Adrian, an invisible current connecting them, transforming their carefully negotiated alliance into something far more powerful. Over the next fortnight, events moved with dizzying speed. Phillips's sister and her children were installed safely at Hollowcrest, while Sir Edmund's investigation into Baron Keller proceeded discreetly. The Bennet family was indeed released as promised, though they were redirected to sanctuary in Scotland rather than America. Most surprisingly, Phillips himself proved invaluable in strengthening the network's security. His intimate knowledge of its vulnerabilities allowed Adrian and Richard to implement new protocols and safeguards that would make future betrayals far more difficult. "He truly regrets his actions," Catherine observed one evening as she and Adrian walked in the garden, the first hints of autumn gilding the leaves above them. "It doesn't excuse what he did, but I believe his remorse is genuine." "As do I," Adrian admitted. "Once his family is safely relocated, he will face consequences, but not the ones I initially envisioned." Catherine squeezed his hand, the gesture now comfortable and familiar between them. "You're a good man, Adrian Blackstone, despite your best efforts to convince the world otherwise." He chuckled, the sound still rare enough to delight her. "A carefully guarded secret. I trust you'll keep it, along with all your others." She smiled up at him as they paused beneath a grand oak tree. "Though I must confess, I rather miss the mystery of the Duke of Shadows. Now that I know you rescue political dissidents and stand up to empires, you seem almost respectable." "Respectable?" Adrian arched an eyebrow, pulling her closer. "How disappointing. Perhaps I should cultivate a new scandalous reputation to maintain your interest." "That won't be necessary," Catherine assured him, her arms slipping around his waist. "I find I'm quite captivated by the real Adrian Blackstone. In fact—" She hesitated, suddenly nervous. "Yes?" he prompted, his eyes searching hers. "I've been thinking about what happens next. After Baron Keller is apprehended, after the network is secured." She drew a deep breath. "About us and our future." Adrian's expression softened. "What thoughts have occupied that remarkable mind of yours?" "That perhaps it's time we truly began our marriage," she said quietly. "Not as a business arrangement or a convenient alliance, but as a real union, in every sense." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Catherine," he said, his voice low and tender, "are you certain? I would never pressure you." "I know," she interrupted, reaching up to touch his face. "That's partly why I'm certain. You've given me time, space, and respect. You've shown me the man you truly are." Her fingers traced the strong line of his jaw. "And I find I've fallen quite thoroughly in love with him." Adrian's arms tightened around her, drawing her against his chest. "I have wanted you since the moment you stood before me at Pemberton Hall, defying me without a trace of fear," he confessed. "But I've come to need you in ways I never anticipated. Your courage, your compassion, your unwavering moral compass." "Then take me home, husband," Catherine whispered, rising on her toes to bring her lips to his. "And let us begin the rest of our lives together." Their kiss deepened, filled with promise and passion too long denied. When they finally parted, Adrian's eyes had darkened with desire, though his smile remained tender. "Your wish is my command, Duchess," he murmured against her lips. That night, as moonlight spilled through the windows of Adrian's, now their bedchamber, Catherine discovered the final truth about the Duke of Shadows, that behind his fearsome facade beat a heart capable of boundless love and unexpected gentleness. And Adrian discovered that in Catherine Fairfax he had found not only a partner in his dangerous work, but the other half of his soul, the light to his shadow, the truth to his deception, the love he had never dared to hope for. 3 months later, on a crisp December morning, Catherine stood in Adrian's study, reading a letter that had just arrived from America. Mrs. Kovacs wrote of their safe settlement in Boston, of her husband's unexpected release and reunion with them, and of the children's adaptation to their new home. "They still speak of you," Adrian noted, reading over her shoulder. "Ilona asks when the kind English lady will visit." Catherine smiled, leaning back against his chest as his arms encircled her waist. "Perhaps someday we will. I've always wanted to see America." "Then we shall," he promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Once matters here are settled." Those matters had progressed significantly. Baron Keller had been quietly arrested, and compelling evidence of his treasonous activities presented to the Home Secretary. The network had been reorganized, with Richard taking a more prominent role to allow Adrian more time at home with Catherine. Most surprising of all had been Sir Edmund's proposal that they formalize their collaboration with certain sympathetic government officials, creating a sanctioned channel for aiding political refugees whose skills and knowledge could benefit England. "From shadow to light," Catherine mused, turning in Adrian's arms to face him. "Who would have thought the feared Duke of Greymont would one day work openly with the crown?" "Only you," Adrian replied, his eyes warm with affection. "Only you saw the possibility of redemption where others saw only darkness." "I saw you," Catherine corrected gently. "Not the masks or the shadows, but the man beneath them all." Adrian's hand moved to rest against her stomach, still flat, but containing their greatest hope for the future. They had confirmed the pregnancy just a week before, and the joy in Adrian's face when she told him had brought tears to her eyes. "Our child will know that man from the beginning," he promised. "No masks, no deceptions. And will know that their father is a hero," Catherine added, covering his hand with hers, "even if his methods were unconventional." Adrian laughed, the sound no longer rare, but a regular melody in their home. "Unconventional indeed, though not as unconventional as a certain lady who dared to challenge the most feared duke in London." "And who accepted his scandalous proposal," Catherine reminded him with a smile. "The wisest decision of my life," Adrian murmured, drawing her closer, "was getting down on one knee before you." As his lips met hers, Catherine reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. From a moment of courage at a London ball to the deep and abiding love they now shared. The Duke of Shadows had stepped into the light, and in doing so had illuminated her world in ways she could never have imagined. Their story, which had begun with fear and uncertainty, would continue with love and hope, not just for them, but for all those they would help together in the years to come. And as for the scandalous proposal that had left her breathless before everyone, it had given her far more than she had ever dared to wish for: freedom to be herself, power to help others, and most precious of all, the truth of Adrian Blackstone's heart. The end. Dear friends, we hope you've enjoyed this tale of Catherine and Adrian, a story of courage, secrets, and love that blooms in the most unexpected places. It's been my absolute pleasure to share this story with all of you. I wish you all an excellent weekend ahead. Whether you're relaxing with a good book, spending time with loved ones, or perhaps drafting stories of your own, I hope it brings you joy and refreshment. Your comments, your own stories, and your thoughtful reflections mean the world to us. It's truly a privilege to craft these narratives for such a warm and dedicated audience on our channel. Each like, each comment, each moment you spend with these characters is deeply appreciated. Thank you for joining us on this journey to 19th century England. Until our next adventure together, may your days be filled with the same passion and tenderness that Catherine and Adrian discovered. With sincere gratitude, the Legends of the Fall Team. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through 19th century London with Catherine and Adrian. It has been an absolute pleasure to share this story with you. We truly appreciate every like, comment, share, and subscription. It keeps us motivated to craft more stories full of love, redemption, and dramatic twists. At the end of this video, you'll find another suggested story from our channel. Click and be surprised by more emotional, unforgettable tales like this one.